The other beautiful thing why owners love this is it allows us to remove the black box and have transparency. I have a roadmap I can get back on a budget. Yeah. Well, what would that take? Well, here is all the decisions we'd have to make to get back on budget. And you mean I could actually have a roof garden, but if I gave up my lobby, I actually would be more willing to, it starts to give the reins back to the owner and also the designer. This is where designers are savvy designers. I mean, I've talked to designers from HDR. They're like, I use Join as a weapon to basically get back on budget. I can actually use and negotiate back with the GC about how to get back on budget. GCs don't have really when I say this, they don't have a horse in the game about what the budget is. Most of the time it's like, just fix the target and let me build it. I don't really care if it's 110 or 90 million. I'm not once it's under contract, that's when I care. But up until that point in the budget phase, I don't have a horse in the game. Let's just figure it out. The owners really are struggling with that, and they need ability to understand which levers to pull. So Join allows you, the owner, the designer, and the general contractor to kind of come together and really see the impacts of that.
Welcome back to Constructive. Today I have special guest Jason. And Jason, I hope you don't mind. I actually used some AI to come up with an intro for you and see how good it did. So correct me if any of this is improper or needs further explanation, but Jason Brenner, head of industry strategy at Join, an innovative collaborative project delivery platform trusted by over 40% of ENR's top 50 general contractors. You're bringing nearly 3 decades of leadership experience in construction, serving as senior principal project manager at Genetech and in pre-construction roles at Excel, DPR. I think I saw Webcore as well. Across the industry, award-winning, super technically complex projects. Now you're at Join, championing industry-wide best practices, helping models like target value delivery scale across big projects and small. Thrilled to dive into how this hands-on construction experience informs your strategy in construction tech. Do you want to give yourself a little intro?
That was really great. Thank you. Yeah, definitely 30 years in the industry. Think very highly of Webcore, but I have not actually worked at Webcore.
Oh, okay.
Mostly DPR and Excel construction, and then on the owner side for several years, a large pharmaceutical such as and biotech such as Genentech, Johnson & Johnson. So yeah, I'm about half on the owner side and half on the general contractor side, really focused on the large, complicated projects. And yeah, so learned a lot along the way. And so now I'm really excited to be here with Join as the head of industry strategy here, and really trying to create best-in-class practices and lowering the barrier into that. So yeah, we'll get into a little bit more of that, but thanks for the intro. Appreciate it.
Do you want to get into a little bit of your history? Can we go back as far as you're willing to go, entry into the industry, your college years? What kind of intrigued you about the industry at large?
Yeah. So, absolutely. So I've been a builder at heart. I mean, I grew up hands-on building. My earliest memories is probably building tree forts up in Northern California and in bay trees and whatever lumber I could figure out and pull together. And then my dad was a carpenter early on in his career. So we did remodels and all that stuff. So went into, really kind of thinking about doing civil engineering and got into that at UC Davis. And then, but I also love a lot of different things. I have more of a chemistry mindset, really process engineering mindset, and ended up through the course of that coming out with a fermentation science degree, which if you know anything about it, it's not only can I make great wine and beer, but a lot of the earlier biotechs were all based on fermentation. So you had yeast and bacteria, mammalian cells. So when I came out of school and had a couple different options, I was like, wow, man, I really, I could go down to Central Valley and point different directions of where the grape trucks will go at midnight for $9 an hour, or I can go into the biotech arena. And so I chose the biotech arena, came in, started off as a chemist, and quickly moved into manufacturing manager. So, and so that was, at that point I had a team of manufacturing folks below me. And my career's kind of been, I look back like, oh, it all makes sense. But, early on, you kind of like keep following your passion, get a little better at this. And I really like that. And it's hard to know where you're going. So I sympathize with people maybe earlier on in their career where they're like, am I on the right path? And, so trust yourself, you'll get there. So I built, early on was built some of the first human implants, little osmotic pumps that used salt engine with a semi-impermeable membrane on one side. They put it subcutaneously in. And if you could believe it, that piston moved slower than the plate tectonics. So it literally would stay in there for a year. It moved less than an inch. The Pacific plate tectonics moving north past Point Reyes a little faster than that. And so we had to fill this thing aseptically. And to build this thing, what you realize is that to build a HIM plant, you need this huge infrastructure behind you. Massive clean rooms, massive air handlers, massive process control, temperature control, particulate control. And so I started not only having to really be clear about the product, but also the building to support that product development. I went through several building out of those early manufacturing sites. In fact, DPR was one of the first builders there. Fast forward 3 years, we got the NDA, and I was like, I still love building. I'm kind of done with this manufacturing. I want to go build some more. And so that's where my career really started off in construction, building pharma. Went through the whole built a bunch of data centers because that pharma was kind of receding. There's these natural ups and downs, right? Tech booms and biotech drops. And so, you could try to ride the wave. But all along the way, it's always been really very technical, heavy MEP buildings that I've been focused on. And what that means is, and most of them all design builds. So you're really working closely with the engineer as a builder, closely with the owner, trying to figure out what their process requires. I think it was over the course of that, realizing, just the difficulty of managing stakeholders. You have these expectations from the owner. They have, in pharma, it's a regulated industry. They have a bunch of experts on their side to make sure it gets produced clearly, or I should say, produced safely. And so you have to navigate that. You have to really pull that information together. It's not on a print. And so it's this constant kind of dialogue. We now call a lot of this either highly collaborative project delivery or, TBD, which I'm a huge fan for. But early on, it was design build. And, often it was mostly MEP design build. But that's what the roots were, especially in the West Coast. That was very popular. So, yeah, built a couple plants and then went to DPR and then went back to Alza, built out a few more labs there, and then went back to DPR. And that was the next 10 years where I focused primarily on Genentech, did probably several $1 billion with Genentech, building out their plants, mostly in South San Francisco. And then after that, went to Excel Construction, and we built out one of Genentech's first single-use facilities. So this, if you know anything about biotech, a lot of them have these giant bioreactors and whatnot, 2,000-liter bioreactors. And the problem with that is the changeover between one bioreactor to the next takes probably 3 or 4 times as long as actually doing the actual run. And so you have clean in place, steam in place, all the extra process to support that and clean that. Most of the piping in those places is really just to clean the vessels. It's not just to move the product around. So the new technology is single use. So if you could imagine, they slip a giant bag, $40,000 bag into these stainless steel bins, and then they throw those bags out and put another bag. It's like a compressor, bag. They put it in, and so they do all the bioreactor in that, and they throw it out in the next one. So it allows for a lot quicker turnover, a lot quicker iterations, and the molecule size has changed. So it works really well. Genentech wanted to do this back, I think 2022, and yeah, I forget the dates, but regardless, this was their first ground up, and I had the luxury to actually be on that project. We did target value delivery. We actually built a custom tool in Smartsheets that was kind of like what Join does now, but we were struggling, trying to figure out how do we manage all these risks and opportunities, how do we track these costs, how do we trend the costs. You got 12 different stakeholders all trying to figure out, different inputs into that. We did the big room, and we had, pool planning. It was like, pulling it all together. It was great. And that project was award-winning. One of my crowning jewels. I'm really, really proud about that. We kept the budget within 1.5% over 3 years, or I should say a year and a half, 18 months. Yeah, we were turning money back to the owner. And Genentech was just like, most of our projects go 15% over. They want to, don't say that out loud, but they want to, there's like, this is like 1%. How can this be? We're turning back contingency money. And they're like, this is amazing. And that's when you can realize, the benefits of target value delivery. So at that point, like I said, I kind of built this software with a lot of folks on Genentech. I worked with a project controls group, Matt Hironaka and Rachel Gomez, and we built this out. And once that project finished, someone was like, you should really check out Join. It's an amazing cost training tool. And I'm like, I kind of was, to be honest, a little bit like, you haven't seen what I built. And I looked at it. I'm like, oh my God, this is like so intuitive, so easy. This is it. I see it. So I signed their enterprise contract for Excel. And I fell in love with it. I was trying to, I ran the pre-construction group at Excel for a few years. And I'm like, this is what we're using. This is going to be our standard. And then I had an opportunity to go to actually back to Genentech and actually be on their side and work and build out some plants. And then I had this great opportunity to actually come to Join. And I'm like, this is a way for me to actually leverage the best in class pre-construction, gets the broadest group out there. And we'll get into a little bit of the challenge of pre-construction and design management, but it's, I would say it's a neglected area of construction, right? There's a lot of focus on operations and how to operate, improve that. Pre-construction kind of been neglected for many years. And it's not because it's not important. I think it's just because I'm curious what the people are on the show, what they think and what you might think, Seth. But it seems like it just is like a bunch of these, lone wolves that are willing just to get it done, do whatever it takes. And they go on to the next one and they don't complain. They just keep doing it. But they're using these old tools, and there's a lot better ways to do it now. And that's exciting. So that's in a nutshell. I know it's kind of a whirlwind and a lot of twists and turns along the way, but I've definitely seen a lot. That's been fun.
I appreciate the background, and it touches on everything that I wanted to get into, but I'm glad you didn't go too deep anywhere because we can dig in on some of that stuff. But the first thing I wanted to sidetrack on is from the beginning of your conversation, which is just, I resonated with kind of a wandering career path. And I think I like encouraging people to allow themselves to think outside of the box about their own career. And I just think it's interesting that I think we need more people from other industries to get interested in construction too. So I like to hear you're obviously super intelligent guy, but to kind of end up in construction is interesting to me. I wonder if you have advice to people who maybe love construction from afar, or they have other passions. And like myself, I've always been in construction, but I thought I was too creative for the construction industry. And I'm learning in my career that those creative, say it again.
Too creative.
Yeah. Too creative for the industry. But I'm learning that over time, I just realized that I can apply those creative passions to this industry. I wonder if you've felt the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important I think there's a balance here between following your passion, but also, especially early on, is it something that the world needs and is willing to pay for? So, I think there's a lot of great careers out there, and I really admire the folks that have that, can just go for passion and go for the career for the artist or musician or whatnot. I just had a practical sense by myself. Like I just was like, I knew the odds of being really successful at that. I want to find this balance between being able to actually have a good living and also do something I enjoy. And so I was always driven by really intellectual curiosity and more and more like learning more. What can I learn and how can I get better at it? This improvement. And so it started off with chemistry, and then it was like how to build it was always building how to fix and build the plant, the actual human implant, and that was the facility. And there's points where you're like, okay, why does this feel stale? And I like, okay, what part is it that's stale? And I'm like, well, it feels like it's. And I remember at that point, and that's why I actually ended up going in pre-construction for so long, was that pre-construction is not stale. I mean, it's every maybe 3 to 6 weeks, it's a new project. I will have learned the whole drawings in 2-3 weeks. I will already mentally built it in my head. I will know how it's laid out. I know the actual schedule intuitively, price it up, and then I'm kind of like, check, I figured it out. And then I move it onto the operations. And that for me as a personality type was great. There's other folks that are like, I wanted to be out there and I want to see the crane lifts. I want to see actual, the steel going in and look, if that's your jam, that's great. Then you should do that. Early on in my career, that was cool. And then it got to a point where like, it was more the intellectual conceptualization that was cool to me. Right. And figuring it out. And early pre-con was one of my favorites because there were no drawings. I mean, we had maybe a few sketches or whatnot. So I think having faith that it'll lead to something. The other thing is, just constantly improving yourself. I think it's like if you're learning and it's exciting, keep following up. And people, people like, and that's the, you talk about construction. The amazing thing about construction, it's also could be bad, but they're gonna give you as much as you want, right? There's so much work out there. If you're intellectually curious and driven, you're gonna end up, they're gonna keep giving you more responsibility and more responsibility. Sometimes you end up out there hanging out and find you're all alone. You're like, oh, but like, just it's a great opportunity for younger folks to gotta explore. Yeah, and there's
I
so
like to
yeah.
think about sorry, I like to think about I kind of want to try to outline this whole thing before we dig too deeply into what Join does, in case people aren't super into the niche of pre-construction, because in my mind, there's kind of three phases of construction projects. It's that beginning part that you're talking about that in my mind, it's like we got to build this project in our imaginations and on paper and digitally before we build it physically. That's that first phase is like, let's cross every T, dot every I about how we're going to build it in theory before we actually break any ground or break anything. And then you've got the actual operating part. But then I like to think about the third phase being the life of the building, because that matters
Yep.
too. Beyond closeout, I know closeout's kind of a phase, but I'm thinking about that building continues to exist. So to me, that's another phase of our industry that I think we need to not neglect as much. But so those three phases, can you talk about why there is a pre-construction phase? Like maybe just outline it for people who aren't in that niche.
Yeah, so I think you've done a really nice job outlining the three phases. I guess I would add one precursor. Is during the owners on the owner side, there's this conceptualization capital planning phase where the project is just in a project initiation phase, and there might be a pro forma. There's a business case they have, and they actually have to figure out if they can actually have a building that could support the business case. Can they build a building with the right functionality to support that? That's a project initiation phase. And then that moves into the pre-construction design phase. And often pre-construction design kind of, can share a similar parallel path. Often designs a little bit ahead of pre-construction. And then you go into building the actual construction, and then you go to life, the actual life cycle the maintenance and ongoing use of that building. I was saying that it's interesting because a lot of times the life cycle cost of buildings will trump, especially for very capital intensive buildings, hospitals, biofarm, that the life cycle costs will trump the actual original capital costs. And so they're really worried about, especially owners that build on over and over. So these are what Glenn Ballard would call these are producers. They build buildings to support their business. So that's like, petroleum, data centers, the Googles, the Genentechs, the Amgens, all the hospitals, Sutters, and all that. They're they care about the life cycle of the cost, and that will help inform what they should spend in capital. So I digress a little bit on that side. The question you had was, how would you describe pre-construction? Well, simply, it's everything before construction. And I think what happens is often folks will say pre-construction is when the general contractor gets engaged before construction. Often design management, in my mind, runs parallel with that. And owners will often bring a designer in before a general contractor, and more often they'll bring an owner's rep before either of them. And pre-construction is where you're going to link the actual scope and really finalize the scope of the project in line with the other constraints. So cost and schedule are often the constraints, but you could have another constraint called quality. Those are kind of the triads. So linking that, and really that's where you have the most degrees of freedom on a project early on, right? And you can actually, is it going to be 10 stories or 5 stories? Underground garage, or is it going to be surface parking? Are you going to have 150 beds, or are you going to have 50 beds? This is where you can really move the needle of the cost and really help the owner get either back on track or hit their pro forma. When you fast forward to the end of construction, you're now talking about really materiality changes. It's like, well, we could, maybe a little more efficient about install, or maybe we could change out, this fixture for that. But it's really, small percentage of change. And so again, why I loved the pre-construction was I felt, and you talked about your creative spirit. And that's why a lot of folks go into the design is they want that ability to affect change. That's where it happens is up in that pre-construction phase. I don't know if does that help
It does.
summarize that?
Yeah, so let's get into what Join is actually doing, because you've kind of outlined what all those variables are. Like, how is Join helping us communicate these aspects of the project and organize our thoughts around it?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Join is the leading platform for the pre-construction design management phase right now in the US. And we're very fortunate. We have almost half of the large general contractors using it. One in five of the top 400 ENR general contractors are using Join. So there's something there. So people are like, well, what is it? And so it allows us to really see the impacts of our decision making. Yes, it's a cost training tool, but really it's when we're making a decision, what is the cost and schedule impact? And a lot of the traditional method would be as black box, right? And so let me go talk about traditional is owner engages the designer, the design creates a set of prints. You might have the owner's rep price it up. They may have a parallel estimate by the general contractor. The number is huge, and all the owner sees is it's $110 million. No one has the time to go look through the 34 pages of estimates and the details to understand what the assumptions are. The owner's reps are out of line with the GC or vice versa. People are arguing, trying to figure it out. And all of it is based off of a whole set of assumptions. And it's like, and early on in the design, it's like, well, did you assume how many air changes did you assume? How many, what redundancy of air handlers did you assume? What kind of fenestration? What kind of skin? It's like, these are all decisions that have yet to be made, but affect the cost and deliverability of that schedule or of that project. So often in traditional, it's this rear view mirror looking. It's like you're driving, trying to go ahead, looking through the rear mirror because all your information's old. What do I mean by that? By the time they hit print on the drawings, the designer has already set down their pen and it's been 4 to 6 weeks, right? They're coordinating and all that. They hit print, they hand it over to the general contractor. It takes a couple of weeks to find the estimate to get on that. Boom, they crank it out 2 or 3 weeks. You're now 2 months, 3 months behind. And what has the designer done? They're moving on to the next set, the next deliverable. So now they're already putting work in place on an idea that may not ever actually could be done with the right schedule or right cost. And it's the old traditional ways. Let's reverse it. Let's actually talk about the conceptual cost of this decision and see the impact. And so that's this forward-looking cost trend. So if you imagine Join allows you to actually see forward-looking the impacts, and you see both upticks and downticks. The other beautiful thing and why owners love this is it allows us to remove the black box and have transparency. I have a roadmap that I can get back on a budget. Yeah. Well, what would that take? Well, here is all the decisions we'd have to make to get back on budget. And you mean I could actually have a roof garden, but if I gave up my lobby, I actually would be more willing to, like, it starts to give the reins back to the owner and also the designer. This is where designers are savvy designers. I mean, I've talked to designers from HDR. They're like, I use Join as a weapon to basically get back on budget. I can actually use and negotiate back with the GC about how to get back on budget. GCs don't have really when I say this, they don't have a horse in the game about what the budget is. Most of the time it's like, just fix the target and let me build it. I don't really care if it's 110 or 90 million. I'm not like, once it's under contract, that's when I care. But up until that point in the budget phase, I don't have a horse in the game. Like, let's just figure it out. The owners really struggle with that, and they need ability to understand which levers to pull. So Join allows you, the owner, the designer, and the general contractor to kind of come together and really see the impacts of that. So
do you think that's great. Do you think that transparency that you're talking about faces a lot of resistance at times? Because I just know on construction projects, transparency is an issue. It's like sometimes the GC is trying to figure out creative ways to keep his margin, and everybody's doing that to some extent. So do you find a lot of resistance to that level of transparency, and how do you deal with it? You just have to preach the result is good, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think what we're seeing is there are a lot of different folks that use Join different ways. That's the beauty of the flexibility of it. And you can choose the level of transparency. So there's configure, you can configure Join where you can say, we're gonna shut down the actual markups and fees and all that. In fact, only the GC can see it, the owner can't see it, or the subs can't see it. And there's ways to curate what's transparent or not to alleviate some of those pressures. What we're seeing though is folks, the industry's shifting to, like, instead of trying to play the shell game and hide the weenie, trying to, under which cup is where it's almost just like, no, owner, everyone deserves a fair profit. Let's just talk about the profit. The subs, the GCs, the designers, let's let Okay. And so if you can maintain the profit and it's transparent and it's not like you, and this is the thing is like owners can now open up each item and actually see, well, that's an allowance. Oh, we just don't know yet. Oh, but there's the market there. I can see why, how many times are you stuck in this conversation where you're like, well, I can go out there and buy, plumbing fittings and all that stuff. I go to Home Depot and I could buy, $150. Why is this plumbing fixture going to cost me 20? Did you pick it up? Did you actually figure out all the welding? Did you actually blow it through with nitrogen? Did you actually connect? It's like there's this whole other side of it. And that I think a lot of it's a lot of times educating the owners of what things cost. And so we find that the trust builds pretty quickly. And yeah, it is a challenge and it's one of those things, but it allows the general contractor to have conversations in a visual, transparent, upfront way, organized to help basically build that trust. Yeah, I look. There's the full gambit of traditional still, all the way to IPD projects. So I think the industry's moving more to transparency, but there'll always be that people trying to protect their profits like that.
I think it's a really important time to think about when we're choosing software in the construction space, like not just to go after the shiny stuff. There's a lot, like you've said, our industry has a big delta that we can use to use tech because it's been the slowest to innovate for a long time. And I think there's an appetite for it now, but I think that also means the demand being high, there's a lot of people coming in. What kind of differentiates Join, and how do you make sure that you're valuable to your clients? I mean, that MIT report just came out saying everybody using, or a very large percentage of companies using AI are not seeing an ROI for it at all. And
Yeah,
maybe we can get
ROI
into AI too. But yeah, what is Join doing to separate themselves?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll go through a couple different examples, which I think when I'm a project executive and I'm thinking about my construction tech or what new tools I should use on my next project, I have a very narrow window when I can actually do that. It's at the start of at the project. I cannot change over midstream. Changing horses midstream is painful. Changing whatever platform, whether it's how you do RFIs, how you do something in the field, there's this pressure to innovate. However, leaders know that often you can only have a very narrow window right at the start of the project to get that going. So Join, and half the team, we're 50, half of us are all from the industry. So we recognize these pressures. And so our ability to actually jump in and turn on and support a project, we can fire up Join and get projects running within a day. Like we've done it in matters of hours. Often we don't have to do that. Usually it's a week or so, but we've created so much intuitiveness in the software, so the learning curve is very low, right? Or I should say, it's a very low bar. It's very easy to get up and over that hurdle. And so we can jump on the train's leaving the station. We're right there. We have the sense of urgency. The other thing is all of our implementation and customer support team is all US based in this hour, all from the industry. So that when you talk about, I have an owner allowance that's not adding up, and I'm going to the OAC meeting tomorrow, it's really urgent. We know that, and we have the sense of urgency, and we'll jump on it. So we've gotten the feedback we get from our customers is that they've never really had. They're just blown away by our customer support. Huge customer support, low barrier of adoption. We have a lot of anecdotal data. We've had owners talk about how they've just cut meeting time in half. So you literally, how much of your time in a meeting is spent looking at old meeting minutes, trying to figure out whose ball in court is it? Wait, someone didn't update this. Wait, we're still waiting for the estimate, or no, the subcontractors got it. Well, which one? Oh, it's the electrician. Okay, well, electrician's like, oh, I don't have it. I'm waiting for the drawing from the electrical engineer. Electrical engineer, what? I'm waiting for the owner. The owner hasn't decided. So it's like you're chasing this information. Ball in court tracking. So that's what we do in Join, right? So who has the missing information? Where is it? So tracking that. So reduction in meeting time, and what we're also seeing is reduction in actual duration of the decision making. So we'll see. I can look through our data and I can look at the past 4 or 5 years, and I can see the actual dwell time. So when a joint item opens up and closes, over time has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. So 30 days, now we're 20 days. So we're driving faster decisions. Now, not all decisions are created equal. There's more ones that are complicated than others. So owners love it because it's more transparent. GCs are able to actually tell a story. I mean, I've been in many situations where it's like you turn over an estimate and it's 20% higher, And then you get a call from the owner. It's like, what happened? I need you in my office tomorrow with how we're gonna get back in the roadmap right now. How we're gonna get back. And so you need a roadmap how to get back on budget. Okay, quick. Two filters. Here it is. Here's all the stuff we need to do. Like it's not like going through a bunch of different files, trying to figure out different emails, going through old OAC meetings, who decided what. It's all together in one spot. So, and then I mean, a lot of this simplification is from also being on the cloud-based platform, right? So anyone can log in. I mean, the other thing the other pain that we solve for is that one estimator that has the change order log, or that one estimate, one pre-construction manager that has all the risk opportunity, and everything has to go to that person. Well, on a team, $1 billion project where you had 150 team, maybe 200 team members, all the different ideas, like all that information goes to one person. No, disseminate it. So everyone has a login and can go in and start to add information. And basically you're basically allowing everyone to contribute to these different decisions. And it basically drops the overall workload on any one person. So it's like any one of these, like, it's like, what did Google Sheets, shared sheets do for you? It's great. It's like everyone's writing a different part of the document, and they could contribute, and you can review it, and then you can do workflow enable it. And this is where tech can really help. Did I address what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
agreed.
Or asking?
Totally. I was thinking about, yeah, addition by subtraction. And that's what I like
Oh,
about
interesting.
tech that helps us actually like eliminate parts of our workflow and get us home to our families sooner. And ultimately, it sounds like what Join is trying to do is make those decisions easier to make with educated decisions, like have that information in front of you ready to go. I just like the pitch when it's, hey, you can stop doing all of these things instead of, hey, you got to start doing this. But yeah, I don't know. You talked about stakeholders too. And I imagine this is kind of a theme of my podcast, and you're touching on it a lot, but just that communication seems to be the most important thing in our industry. How is Join facilitating better communication amongst everybody involved?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different examples I could give. One of, when I think about being a good design manager, or a good, often it's like, or good pre-construction manager, it's managing which decisions need to be decided at which time, and helping triage, because not all decisions need to be made this week, but organizing those decisions, and then also trying to cue that up for the owner to actually make a decision. The owners look at us as professionals. We're the experts, the designers, the general contractors, the subcontractors. We're the experts, and we're trying to educate. A lot of times we're trying to educate the owner about these different attributes and stuff. And so the first thing is having something that's centralized and organized, that's, all together. You can go to the one spot and see all. You can actually look at, say, okay, here's all the costs. Here's the drawing. Here's the actual link to the Revit model, to the point we're talking about it. And at the bottom, here is all the dialogue back and forth. Now imagine you could do that in a meeting minute. But I mean, I remember doing meeting minutes as a project engineer. It's time consuming even just to get just the gist of each topic, right? Much less. And then you publish it and no one ever reads it. It only reads it when stuff hits the fan. So having it all pulled together in one spot, I think, is really powerful. And so I've seen people use Join to organize what gets talked about at OAC meetings, facilitating the types of decisions, prioritizing the types of decisions. It also allows people to be better prepared coming into meetings. So, okay, we're going to be talking about, heads up, we're going to be talking about these 5 items tomorrow. Okay, great. The owner, the designer, their stakeholders can go open that up and actually see the detail and come prepared, as opposed to, like, I mean, how many times have you been in a meeting where you're like, okay, let me recap what we did last, and you spend 30 minutes recapping, and you lose, okay, now we have 20 minutes. Let's make a decision. And everyone's like, I'm overloaded. And you're like, we just made one decision this week. I mean, it's like,
yeah, or we'll circle back to that next meeting. That's a common response at the end of meetings that really frustrates me, because it's like, what was the point of this meeting? To bring up something that we'll talk about again next time? I mean,
I don't know. It's just
it is frustrating. Yeah. You mentioned something in one of the podcasts I listened to you in with Felipe about target value delivery, being able to scale down to smaller. And I just want to broadly talk about smaller projects, because most of my career has been on less than $100 million projects, and a lot of them sometimes $1 million projects or less, so a lot of construction is happening in smaller dollar amounts, and it's harder for some of those owners and builders to innovate and do R&D and get to use some of the tools like Join that maybe have a price barrier to entry, but I think that that's going to change soon. And I bet Join is trying to be a part of that. And just like, how do we apply some of these principles to those billion-dollar projects where they are realizing some efficiency gains and we're all here not because we feel
Yeah.
like we're too small?
Yeah, it's interesting. I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Seth. What I'm seeing, and when I look at the data and the use and the trends of who's using Join more and more, so I can actually see who's using Join by different size of ENR or scale, volume of the construction volume. And we're seeing more and more of these mid-tier and GCs moving up and using Join more and more. And the reason is because it's a way for them to actually deliver premium level pre-con services at a fraction of the cost because everything is so efficient, right? You one project, if you think about trying to actually put together a cost estimate, then a variance sheet, and then mapping it to a PowerPoint and organizing all the OEC meeting minutes to pull together all together for the next OEC, and it all falls on one person, it's daunting. What ends up happening is you just end up turning over the estimate. You can't do a report. A lot of times a lot of these smaller GCs have data, estimating data software that actually just doesn't have great report functionality. We have a lot of general contractors who are importing their estimate just into Join just to get the better reports to show the owners. The beauty here, I think, is that I'm actually seeing smaller GCs on smaller projects using Join to their advantage. They want to provide better service. I mean, we all want to provide a great service to the owner. I mean, we're wired that way. We want to. Then we're forced to actually choose, like, am I going to go home tonight and see my family or work this weekend and get that extra, report or organize their VE log, or I'll just do it the old way because there's just so much work. People are just like constantly battling that. That's why, again, I think the right software, but it takes a leap of faith. It takes a little leap of faith. The good news is that unlike other softwares out there, it Join's really easy to learn.
That's great. I'm curious too if you could talk about some of your experiences in the industry at Excel or before. Just like what are some of the counterintuitive things you learned over time about construction if you're entering into it, like life lessons? I don't know. I'll leave it kind of open-ended. What do you want to tell people about construction?
Yeah, counterintuitive. That's a good question. Yeah, there's two, and this was one of my first bosses who was probably my hardest, most difficult boss. I learned the most. It was also very painful. Probably could have been an easier way to learn. And so one of the first things he taught me was, hey, when you sold it, stop selling. And what he meant was, when you get someone to say, okay, I get it, but you don't need to keep talking on and on and on and on and on. Like, I think there's this, like, we feel, especially younger in our career, it's like we got to keep showing and telling and look, here's the other thing is that we're the experts. We're being hired. We should know. And I think this kind of leads into the next point that I was going to say that's kind of counterintuitive. Despite the fact that it's almost like it's maybe a problem or a challenge in the industry, is because we're supposed to know. We basically say we know when we really don't. And as opposed to, hey, let me get back to you on that. But that's perceived as, well, you can't get back. You got to answer. You got to be decisive. And so there's this, the old school, like, well, just be decisive and tell them what you need to do. It was like, versus like, hey, I think we're on the right track. I'm going to go pull in the expert. And see, here, this is the thing, is that there's so many specialties and nuances in the construction, and most general contractors have the expertise within their organization. But that new PE, new project manager, or even seasoned PX might, hey, all I've done is steel construction. I've not done concrete. I don't know what bubble form is, or let me come back with that expertise. So I think we need to do a better job of actually saying, I don't know, but I can find out and get the better information. I think that will help build trust too, because what happens is once you tell them an answer and then it's not right, now you're back in this, like, now you got to defend your original spots, and and so I don't know. Those were the ones that came to mind.
And I got one last one just for myself personally. It made me think, just, you're becoming a friend of mine, a mentor. And I want to know, there's a lot of ways to learn more about construction. There's DBIA, CMAA, there's Lean Construction Institute. Beyond that, you can search YouTube and find a million different places. I think there's a lot of people out there like me and you that are in construction and genuinely want to help this industry, kind of want to raise the tide and have less of a selfish mindset and like want to help. Where do you find the best information? How do you like grow your career? What are the best tips for like, I want to have a bigger impact on this industry? Where do I go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, finding kindred spirits out there. I think I I've really liked LCI, and especially and for me, I like the ones that focus. I mean, LCI is broad, and a lot of times they focus on lean construction and the actual operations, but they have lean construction towards design and pre-construction. So going to those conferences, I think it's a mixed bag in the sense like, oh, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, and all that. However, the conversations in between the hallways and meeting, looking at people talking and following up with a speaker afterwards and certain topics, you start to realize like, hey, we're not alone. There's a lot of people out there struggling to move the industry. And when you hear these success stories, you come out and you're like, all right, I drank the Kool-Aid. I mean, that's why like they have these off-site sales meetings, these big, Salesforce or, all these big, they take their sales team off and they go do the Raha, like, and they come back and they're all jazzed and focused. And so I find those conferences can be powerful that way. And I know there's a lot of vendors and whatnot, but if you go and listen, that's a good way to do it. Also have a core group of folks that I think are very innovative. You spoke about, Felipe, Stan Chu, Duan, Dean Reed was my personal mentor for 20 years. He wrote the book with Atul Kanzode about, integrated project delivery. I mean, we literally shoulder to shoulder. So this is the challenge with remote working and stuff, especially for young folks in their career, is there's no substitute about sitting shoulder to shoulder in the trenches with a seasoned person. They're just picking up their EQ. And a lot of us is like, yeah, that was a tough conversation. And don't sweat it, because there's going to be a lot of hard conversations, a lot of things that you will take personally that it's just business. And having someone that you can actually go through and then Dean was always, in my mind, was always setting the bar of like, here's where the moon is. I'm like, okay, I can't fly to the moon, but at least I could target the top of the hill. And and so what can I implement on that? And so it's important to find those folks within your organization that will challenge you intellectually, but also be there, side by side. So that's what's helped grow me. Yeah.
Well, we're so close geographically. I think I need to get shoulder to shoulder with you at some point.
Yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, we'll go out to dinner, or breakfast, or whatever. Absolutely.
Appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna link people to. I'm certainly gonna tag you. Do you want people to, I guess, join.build? Am I right there? Anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's join.build. If folks feel free to, if you want, link me to my LinkedIn. And, I also think I do want to give back and share lessons learned. And I don't know, I'd be curious, maybe, you could check with your, like, I almost like office hours. Like my expertise is in pre-construction design, man. Like would office hour, like once a week or once every other week, or maybe once a month where it's just a 2-hour and we just hold like, here's a set of questions. People, I mean, I don't know. I'd be curious, like, how do we get people to feel like, okay, I can just show up, maybe I'm listening to the conversation, maybe I could add something, but, hey, what's the best in class way to do, contingency allowances? How do we have those conversations with the owners? And how do we, because I think there's a lot of folks out there that, the other thing is there's not that many seasoned people. So how do you get that, these junior folks that want the experience, they want to have but unless you have the conversations, it's hard. So maybe, I don't know. What do you think about something like that?
I like this. I want to facilitate some of that. I'd love to see you too. I know one of the things I saw, one of my first guests was Javier from cmbuilder.io. And he was doing this thing every Friday. He called New Feature Friday. And he would do like a funny video and then talk about one of the features. And I just found the concept of engaging with your audience weekly and doing it kind of fun, but having a topic that people are interested in, I would encourage you to do that. I also, that's kind of the part of this is the goal of the podcast is, I mean, there's multiple, but one is to gather and capture wisdom from older, wiser people
Yeah.
with more experience than me, and
Let
not
me know if you
they don't
find
have
one.
to be older, but yeah.
I'm just kidding.
It tends to work out when they are older because, life experience, but
I know. Yeah, I'd be happy to. This has been
yeah.
great, and I am trying to figure out how to make it light and fun, and where people can kind of come and say, "Well, like, geez, a bomb went off last week. What could I have done differently? You might not have been able to do anything different.
Yeah.
That grenade was going to go off anyway, and all you could do is shield yourself. Or you're like, you could have put that pin back in. Here's a couple ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love the idea. Thanks for coming on, Jason. Thanks
yeah,
everybody for joining.
yeah. Awesome, great. To be continued. Take it easy.